year. I'm not going to go through full introductions. People's profiles are in your packs, so you can read those for yourselves. Else, may you please take us through your presentation. We've got 20 minutes to go through that. Thank you.
Okay.
No, I'll manage it. I'll manage it.
Good afternoon. I'm Ilse Kar from the Department of Trade and Industry, and I've been appointed recently to look at the fourth industrial revolution in the context of the manufacturing industry. And I'm also building some capacity in the department to work out how to respond to the fourth industrial revolution. So what I want to talk about this afternoon, I can't cover everything. We don't have the time for that, and I won't do justice to the fourth industrial revolution in saying that I've covered everything. So I'm going to focus on the context in which we in the Industrial Development Division work on the fourth industrial revolution. I will give you some background on manufacturing, on the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, the country readiness that we are working on with the World Economic Forum, some slide on robots. I thought that I can't leave that out, especially in manufacturing, and then something about competitiveness, talent identification, and so on. And then lastly, we have a flagship project in DTI that we are launching soon, and we've piloted a program for that. So in terms of manufacturing, I don't think it's very clear. Well, firstly, the first graph that you are seeing there is about how our manufacturing sector are doing in the past 20 years. So if you look more or less towards the middle, is 1998. So since 1998, manufacturing has been declining from about 24% to 12% where we are today. And from 1989, the manufacturing sector has shedded 500,000 jobs, which I think is significant. On the right-hand side, top right-hand side, you will see a graph on wages that are compared to productivity. So the top is the wages that are increasing over time, and then the bottom one is productivity. So the gap is just becoming larger and larger. Then lastly, the point that I want to make on the last graph is a calculation was done on labor productivity growth as a percentage output per worker. On the left-hand side is a negative, and the right-hand side is positive. Right at the bottom, it indicates the benefits of the manufacturing sector, and that would be an area that we should consider for job creation. Going to the next slide on the Sustainable Development Goals. All of us know that we've got the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and jobs. And the goals for that, the development goals is Goal 1, the poverty, and in Goal 1, they've identified access to education as also falling in that area. Goal 10, reduce inequality, And I've added goal 5 that looks at gender equality and empowerment, which is equally important. Then goal 8 on promote employment and decent work and job opportunities. So what I've done is look at the rest of the development goals and identified those goals that I think we should develop specific interventions on that we can't leave out if we look at the 4th Industrial Revolution. So the first one is goal 4 that looks at education for all, quality education for all, and to promote lifelong learning and basic literacy. I know, and we know that it's being done at the moment, but there's specific areas that we will have to look at from government in terms of policy and specific interventions that we will have to make if we want to participate in the 4th Industrial Revolution. The next one is goal 6, which is about water and access to water. And also clean water. We know of the water problems that certain provinces are experiencing, and I think that's very important to look after that resource going forward. Lastly, I've identified goal 9, which is to build infrastructure. And in terms of the 4th Industrial Revolution, it's about ICT infrastructure that will become very important for businesses and for civil society to have access to the internet and to data. And then also included in this is innovation and industrialization, which we need specific interventions on. This is the out of the report, the Human Development Report of the United Nations, where they've identified, they said that human development should be around certain drivers, which is at the bottom, the 8 drivers that they've identified. And it's about developing capabilities and opportunities for everybody. And then the Human Development Action Agenda recommends that effective policy and planning for inclusive growth should take place if we want to do human development. Further to that report, the question was asked, what skills are required for the 4th Industrial Revolution or the digital economy? And the 21st century skills that was identified, or were identified, the areas are there in the blocks. And what I've done is to look at the 4th Industrial Revolution and say, so how do we apply this? And I'm sure there's many different ways in which we can apply that. And I've just listed a few things here. So in terms of the way of thinking going forward, a new mindset for jobs is required. So your traditional sectors where we have labor-intensive sectors, that would not necessarily be the solution going forward. And we need to think outside the box if we want to address unemployment. Secondly, the tools for working. There's many production technologies, new technologies that are coming in. All of you, I'm sure, have some knowledge about that or some detailed knowledge about that. 3D printing, drones, blockchain, and so on. Then ways of working, the third one, we also need new ways of working if we are going to work in the digital economy. The most important one for me that stands out that we are neglecting a lot is the digital management and business strategies that we need to develop in business and in industry, with specific decisions, business decisions that must be taken on that level. Then lastly is the skills and employment, which we spoke a lot about. But in the context of manufacturing, we need high-end skills, technical skills, going forward if we are going to work in the advanced manufacturing sector. On this slide, maybe some of you have seen this, is the World Economic Forum page for South Africa. The report was released in January 2018, answering the question on, at this stage, how ready is our country for taking on the fourth industrial revolution? Mostly what I've presented here is the drivers of production and the structure of production. In the report, you will see in the diagram on the right-hand side, they've used 57 indicators, which is included in the report, and we don't have time to go through it. Also, what they've done is they indicated the report covers 100 countries, and they've ranked the countries according to the different drivers. And the two that stood out for South Africa was, besides the sustainable resource management, is the management of human capital, which is very important, which just confirms what we are discussing here today. Then on industrial robots, what I would like to qualify in terms of robots, people just refer to robots as robots. But in the manufacturing sector, we differentiate between industrial robots and robots that have social applications. So in industrial robots, we are following what's happening. And there's some statistics that I've put on the slide. For instance, 74% of annual robot sales belongs to 5 countries, China, US, Korea, Japan, and Germany. And then the graph indicates the annual world supply of industrial robots. And what's important to notice is it's estimated in 2020 that the increase will be more than 80% per year going forward, utilizing industrial robots in manufacturing. And then lastly, if you look at the amounts that are spent on the operational robots for industry, in 2016, 1.8 billion US dollars were spent, and it's estimated that by 2020 that 3 billion US dollars will be spent on industrial robots. Going then to skills development, what we as the department see as the solution to skills in the manufacturing sector is to look at talent and identify talent, because talent drives manufacturing competitiveness. In the Deloitte Global Manufacturing Competitiveness Index, they've identified 12 drivers for competitiveness, which is one of our major objectives in the Department of Trade and Industry. And if you look at the 12 that are listed there, in priority order, the first one is talent identification, which impacts the most on competitiveness, which indicates to us as policymakers that we have to focus on talent development. So lastly, in conclusion then, the department started in 2010 with the development of a model to identify talent and to identify a solution for industry to employ the right skills. So one of the biggest challenges in industry at the moment in our consultations with industry is that there's a mismatch between the demand for certain skills and the supply for certain skills. And I'm talking in the context of advanced manufacturing. They can't find the right skills. So what the department did is to develop a model, a system solution, that we've piloted for the past 10 years, that's consisting of skills development and enterprise development. And we are busy, we've started with 3,000 students for the pilot, and next year the last students will finish the training, and it will be in the advanced manufacturing space. I've listed some of the elements of the model there, which you can read. I think what's important and what's different in terms of the skills development is that it's competency-based. So we go through a recruitment process, an extensive recruitment process to identify talent. And then if we have identified the talent, we support the person up until he's competent or she is competent to go into industry, to work in the manufacturing industry. We also have registered our curriculums with the Department of Higher Education, and we are in the process to also add some lessons that's directly related to the fourth industrial revolution. And the pilot ended in 2016. And we are going to expand this program with discussions with industry. We've concluded an agreement with industry to work together. So we've got a formal partnership with industry that we've signed. In the beginning, in April, we've signed a memorandum of agreement with industry and the implementation agency to expand this program into a much bigger program. And the program will look at adding trades that will be applicable to the fourth industrial revolution space. And the next trade that we are going to focus on, which industry identified as the highest priority, is to look at industrial maintenance, robotics, and mechatronics. So we will work in that area specifically for advanced manufacturing. Lastly, the partnership going forward, like was said before, our view is if you want to develop policies and strategies for the fourth industrial revolution, it's not clear-cut where for instance, in manufacturing, industry is. The automotive industry, for example, needs the ICT sector, or they need electronics. And immediately, it requires partnerships, not even only between different sectors of the economy, but it's also partnerships with labor, partnerships with civil society, with other governments maybe. So partnerships is what we need to do going forward. So the department will start with an extensive consultation process. We've done a stakeholder management strategy where we've identified all the stakeholders, and we will start our consultations before we release our formal policy and strategy intervention for the fourth industrial revolution. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilse. I tried to intimidate you, and you just did not take heed of it. But the other advantage you had is that what you were presenting was interesting. So I was, following. Any questions of clarity? Anybody wants to raise something, anything you did not understand? I see one hand. Can we have the mic? So there's one hand here. Any other hand? Another second hand there. Is the mic coming? Two hands. If you can shout, you can start, say. The third one is Hema there, as the mic is coming. You're not blessed with a voice. You will not never own a church if you don't have that kind of voice. Yeah, proceed so long.
My name is Bosole, and my surname is Chiri. I'm from SACO, South African Chemical Workers Union. My clarity-seeking question is that the issue of the fourth industrial revolution is a man-made issue. As long as we are alive, we will be able to have more things that they should be done in a quicker way, in a softer way. Now, if that is the case, in our country, we have people who are still living below the poverty. And that's why in the NETLAC, they came with the issue of wage and national minimum wage. Now, what will happen to the people who are disabled, who need to be fit themselves in this industrial revolution? That's my clarity-seeking question.
Okay, second question was over there.
My name is Thomas Kenjana. I'm the president of the Southern African National Cooperatives Council. We are aggressively signing MOAs with institutions of learning, particularly the ones within the CHE. My concern, coming from organized business, is with respect to the MOA that you alluded to, that has been signed last month or something, in respect of taking forward into phase 2 the results of the success of the pilot. Now, when you say with industry, industry for me is, it could be you having chosen, for an example, the retail motor industry. That's an industry. However, you are limiting what you are seeking to do if then an association to you represents the industry. And my concern again is the focus that you are saying the phase 2 is going to be on robotics and all of those. However, my plea is that can we have your presentation and that MOU such that your stakeholder management processes and everything, we make sure that MOU is comprehensively embracing the stakeholders that it may be excluding. Thank you.
Thank you. Third question, Hema.
Hello, I'm Hema Hariram from NAPTOSA, the Teachers Union. I want to pick on, my issue is linked to your comment on your talent search and going forward. I just want to give you a background, noting that only 34% of the learners who complete schooling in terms of a cohort that started, and also less than 40% that goes to higher education institutions. We also have learners in the system who go to special needs schools. And a small, I think a very minuscule percentage of these learners do write the NSC. The others come out with a competency certificate that amounts to nothing. That piece of paper is worth nothing. Now, your talent clearly, from listening to you, would have looked at the high-performing students. Surely these other learners have talent. Is there any plans afoot to look at these learners and see what talents they might have and to empower them? We've heard about the needs. They fall in that group. That is my input. Thank you.
Right. So I want to, is that the last one? Okay. Let me see. Two more. Then we close and we move on. One there and another there.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Dr. Naidu from the Gauteng government. What I want to know is that in this presentation, I would like to see a high-level strategic implementation strategy. Firstly, the rollout should be policy. We should start with policy because we got white economy. The white economy, we must protect ourselves against white economy in terms of penalties, in terms of, you find it that they produce, we import from the first tier industry 90% into South Africa, a knockdown model. That should be gone to 40% local manufacture. So where we'd like to see technology move, where government subsidized technology with the white economy so that they can make an enabling area to boost their SMMEs, RMI, and SMEs of black containment. And I'd like to see ring fence of a budget vote. What government is putting into the system. It mustn't be a talk show hanging high level on the drawing board. We must look at technology, and the other one, bring in the relevant universities into our country. We don't want to see a bunch of Indians coming from India and doing the decoding in the banks. Digital economy. We want to create that jobs at the fast, long span to a year 2030 in how we actually show it on graphs and what government is putting in the contribution. And that's where it's for mine to strengthen the autotronics, the mechatronics, which I brought into the country. I put in 2 life cycle engineering in universities called automotive engineering and life cycle engineering. And that was put into 2001. How is that making reference to the big picture we're seeing now in the 4th Industrial Revolution? Thank you.
Last one.
Hi, I'm Hamida. I'm the Acting Executive Director of Naledi, which is the research arm for COSATU. So I want to put a bit of a spanner in the works because I find I've been going to quite a few meetings on the 4th Industrial Revolution, and I don't know whether we all know what we're talking about. Because, for example, as Labour, I contest the fact that this is the 4th Industrial Revolution. This is probably the 6th or the 7th. So I'm not sure where everybody's at and whether you agree or disagree. So that's the first point. So I think it would be useful if we can maybe just have a common understanding, set a definition so that we can say, okay, I agree with that definition, or we don't agree, because then at least we can engage. I think the second point is, for Labour, the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is the future of work, is actually an oxymoron. If you take the point, you can't be talking about the future of work when you're talking about people not being in work. Yeah? When you talk about robotics and in terms of some of the orientations in which the future of work is being presented, if you're presenting human beings as being null and void, then we need to really contest. I think my concern in relation to the presentation, from a Labour perspective, is you've dropped off the goal 8, which is the decent work agenda. And for us, if you're talking about a 4th Industrial Revolution and we are part of it, then I think the decent work should be at the essence. Whether you are building a robot or whether you're providing the kinds of sophisticated digital work that you're doing, but I think the decent work agenda, particularly if Labour is going to be incorporated in this perspective, it has to be absolutely key. I mean, I think I'll leave that there, but sorry, and then if I could just ask you, Chair, initially when you opened up, you said questions of clarity. So I think if we're doing questions of clarity, then it's clarity, but if it's questions, then I think you should open the floor, because my hand would have gone up initially if it was question time. Thanks.
Thank you, Sisi. The line between questions of clarity and those of substance was going to be porous all the time. Nevertheless, that allows me to allow Ilse to answer those that are questions of clarity from her presentation, so that those substantive questions we can take up, going forward. Yes?
Can I sit here?
Oh, you can answer from there.
Can I answer from there? Okay. On the first item that was raised on the disabled people, what I have to qualify, and when I started as well, is I was focusing on the manufacturing sector only and on the area of advanced manufacturing. So I think there's many other issues that actually fall outside of the manufacturing sector. For instance, e-commerce is one of those items. But specifically on disabled people, if I have to respond, I think going forward, if we look at new technology like cobots, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the terminology, is cobots is there to assist humans in terms of manufacturing. And I think the same can be applied to disabled people, where they can be assisted well, firstly, in the manufacturing space, it will be mechanical. Surely there's other applications that you can also look at. Then the gentleman from the Cooperative Council, what we are developing in the Department of Trade and Industry is not, the pilot that we've developed is not sector-specific or industry-specific. It's focusing on trades. So the students or the artisans that qualify and that are certified have a trade qualification, not for a specific industry. They can go and work in any industry. We've got a lot of pressure from industry, specific large sectors of our South African economy that wants us to change our program into a sector-specific program, and we say no. The problem that we have identified is that the young people don't have a national qualification that they can work in any sector or any industry. And then just to clarify on the skills development that we are doing is on top of the existing educational system. So that's in the advanced manufacturing high-tech space on machinery, high-tech machinery. That we are doing our skills development. So it's very specific on a specific area of manufacturing that we are focusing on. On the talent sourcing, specifically, we are sourcing talent. We are not looking at the marks of students that are leaving school or matric. We go through an extensive recruitment process to identify skills that will be suitable for technical training. And what we have realized in our model is when we started with the artisans training is most of the students that we've identified or the talent that we've identified needs a foundation phase that we have to go through to bring them up to speed to start with the artisan skills development. For instance, it's technical English. Is one of the big areas that we had to focus on to bring them up to speed before we can start with the technical training in the high-end skills development. On the white economy, maybe I can just say that the department, our department is busy with the localization drive for local industry, to support local industry. We've got a Black Industrialist program that we are focusing on to do specific empowerment in the manufacturing sector. And we are working with the Engineering Council going forward on what should be part of the curriculums in that field. Then lastly, on the lady from Naledi, thank you very much. Your comments were very useful. I will take that into consideration. What we also have realized is exactly the points that you were addressing in terms of awareness. I think that that will become a big part of presenting our policy and strategy, is also to do awareness on what exactly the fourth industrial revolution is, what is the impact, what is the challenges, and how can we address the challenges going forward into opportunities.
Thank you so much. So we may even be talking about the fifth industrial revolution. And in fact, we'll probably transcend the fourth industrial revolution without realizing that we're going into the fifth. I just imagine an environment where things are more and more driven through artificial intelligence. You know, the role of the cyberspace, it's more, kind of, pronounced. Things are run by big data. There's lots of sensors around us. There is all sorts of physical and biological manifestations of these new, technologies. We are more connected than we were, before. And if you take that into account and link it to the presentations of the morning, there are some demand-side things that we need to handle differently. Sorry, some supply-side things that we need to handle differently. And the demand-side, dynamics are also changing, which we have to take into account. How we teach our kids, what we teach our kids, how we train our people, how we should be retraining our people, should take into account the all new sets of demands, not just in the labor market, but in the way of life, the way people live. They live differently. So the question is, how do we connect, the two? And I think there are lots of linkages that we have to make. There are lots of networking and feedback loops and incentives that we have to build in the environment. So I think that's the complexity that we have to deal with. So ILS and them, deal with that. They're policing that, the stuff that has to happen, from the private sector and so on. So it's that complexity we have to deal with. I think nobody exactly knows where we're going and how actually we should be preparing ourselves, but we must use the best of what we know in order to design, the systems that we have to deliver us into, a better, a society going forward. So I want to invite both, I don't know why I never called you Phil, because you're DG. But I want to invite Phil and Rose to comment, largely on those guiding questions. Yeah, you coming, George? You coming? On those guiding questions, one is, what is the state of affairs? I mean, how well are we managing these dynamics and so forth? Secondly, what are the emerging gaps? And thirdly, what could be the blind spots? And fourth, what are some of the recommendations that are emerging? And if you could, at the same time, try and address Posolo's question about, these man-made challenges and issues and other questions that have emerged. So I do know that Phil will leave us at 15:30. I do not know that George is leaving us before then. So Phil.
Yes. You want me to come to the front?
You can sit, actually, if you want.
Let me start with this point raised by Naledi about what are we talking about. I don't know if you were here this morning when I did the presentation before lunch, were you? Because that's exactly the point we were making, to say different countries are aware of the, shall we say, the broad building blocks for the next industrial revolution. As you, in the department, we don't call it the fourth, we call it the next. Precisely because, as I said in the morning, the Japanese are calling it Society 5.0. So you can say, where do they start counting? You know, if it's the fifth cycle of changing the society, which is different from those that are saying is the fourth one. So the point here that I think we should all perhaps take home is that each country tends to look at what is it that would work, taking the building blocks of this next industrial revolution. I gave examples, for instance, in Switzerland and how they've embraced this, and if you go to the other parts of the world, in Germany, they've been very, very good at manufacturing, so they are investing heavily on how the next industrial revolution will impact on that. So I agree with you. At some point, we all need to say, what do we mean in South Africa? But we can't have that conversation forever, because the train is moving and is moving very, 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 very fast. The chair has asked us some gaps. I do think that if one of the building blocks is the Internet of Things, I think we need to move with speed in South Africa with our broadband infrastructure rollout. This is an area that I think if we do really want to get going in this area, unless we get it right, we're going to find it difficult. Let's say, for instance, we take the issue of smart cities, which is one of the areas that other people are focusing attention on. In South Africa, we have spatial disparities. We continue to deal with the legacy of apartheid. We need to move very, very quickly, and to address some of these spatial disparities, we will have to really start thinking about smart cities. So putting people close to the work environment, making sure that the data that you collect around what's happening in the cities is enables you to make quick decision making. I gave an example of the accident this morning. It's just one. I mean, same thing in agriculture, which we will have to think about. People are doing smart and climate smart agriculture. You see drones moving around in the agricultural activities, taking data in whether the soil requires water to be. So all of these things are not going to happen unless you've got a mechanism of moving data around. So I do think that this is a blind spot. The second comment that I'd like to make is that there are a number of South African industries that are moving ahead with embracing aspect of the fourth industrial revolution, and they are doing things. I mean, I'm aware telecom, I'm aware some of the industries in the health space. I would hope that as we proceed, we think of how do we have a public-private partnership between the public sector and the private sector that is working in these areas. There is a lot of synergies that we can derive if we work together. Because if we don't, then I suspect that we will continue with an industrial revolution or this one, we will not be able to achieve inclusivity. And one can give specific examples of how, if we're not careful, this can drive even further the attempt of addressing this. And then the next point is I do think there's an opportunity for skills. And we have indicated this morning in the presentation that this is abundant. What we need to do is to identify those areas where these skills are needed, and we have shown that this is perhaps another gap. To train people in these areas would require that we do things differently. I know that, in fact, one of the speakers this morning gave a very nice model about the providers on the supply side, the chairman example. And I don't think we have as many of those in South Africa, where we train people in interdisciplinary programs that are designed specifically. You would remember in the presentation that we gave this morning, we gave something which we call a convergence technologies platform. And if you remember, the other example that I gave is an example of how you can develop the next generation of intelligent prosthesis. Those are mechanical engineers working together with electronic engineers, together with software, Java people, as well as people who just, doctors, and people who just know, the economics. So if you have a training that says my discipline is mathematics, I'm sure there is room for that to continue the discipline, but we need to be thinking about how do we design in a, shall we say, prescribed way, those areas of learning, those areas of research, those areas of skills development that bring this discipline together. So maybe those are the quick, I haven't put them in the framework that you have asked for, Chair, but I've also been able to maybe make one or two comments to some of the issues that were raised. Thanks very much.
Right, my turn. People, I know maybe a little bit about manufacturing, but not enough to be able to stand up here and talk about what individual industries need to do. In my view, I still believe that as Commission 3, we are missing the point. And I'm going to say, and the reason I'm going to say that, the reason I'm saying that is the following. The fourth industrial revolution is about combinations of technologies that is getting more and more intelligent to the point that it can replace humans unless we do something differently to make sure that they improve the lives of humans with humans. So I have a formula. My formula is that human ingenuity plus intelligent machines in combination equals exponential economic growth. That's my thesis. Now, we're spending a lot of time talking about the technologies, and I think that is important. And in fact, I think there are going to be various industries that in combination, if you just think, for example, as you were saying, Ilse, if we put together blockchain, drones, and 3D printing, big data, machine learning, neural networks, within the manufacturing sector, we can make a massive difference. Absolutely. It's not just about the individual technologies, it's how they combine to redefine what industry 5.0, 6.0, X.0 needs to be. And I think we do need to spend more time figuring out what industry X.0 is for the sectors that we believe are important. And I would purport, for example, that agriculture is one of those industries that I believe is important. I would argue that manufacturing is. I would also argue that healthcare is. I would probably argue that there's a few more, and I think that we'll work through that in terms of figuring out what industry X.0 is. But I think that there is also society X.0, and society X.0 is the human ingenuity part. And I am very, very worried, and maybe this is way too controversial for this session, but let me say it all the same. I'm very, very worried that we are still teaching, training our people to be conveyor belt workers. That conveyor belt mentality arrived here on the Pinta, the Nina, and the Santa Maria in 1642 or 1652. And it's not enough. Now, I recognize that we are talking about a complete spectrum. There are people that are differently abled, as per what you said earlier, and those are the people that need help. Right? And then there are people that have got certain kinds of skill sets, and we've got an industry capability that differentiates us. Let's push them through that industry capability. But if we want to unlock the human ingenuity part, and I don't believe that there is a single mine worker in this country that cannot operate a drone. I don't believe that. Because to operate a drone, you must have learned how to play Pac-Man. And if you can play Pac-Man, you can operate a drone. It really is. This is all you do all day long. It doesn't require, it just requires an ability to use what you did as a child whether you were driving a brick around when you were a child on a dusty street, or you created a little wire car for yourself, that's all really that we need. So I'm not looking for talent development and skills per sector. I am looking for the new skills that all of us need to have, some in a more basic form, some in a more intermediate form, and some in a more advanced form. And I think in a dynamic way, those skills need to come together, which is for me the human ingenuity part, so that we can free ourselves from the conveyor belt mentality. Because digital is not about digital in itself, it's about unlocking innovation. And if we don't unlock innovation, we will just be conveyor belt workers. Input, labor. We are not labor, we are human beings, right? We are supposed to be the beneficiaries. And our mindset is not about being beneficiaries. Our mindset in South Africa is about taking something out of the ground, putting it on a ship and giving it to somebody else. So here are the skills that I believe that we need to focus on, and I didn't have a lot of time to talk about that. I've got six skills that I would like us to think about in all of the parts of the various industries that we are talking about, so that we can bring Society 5.0 to life. The first one is WeQ. And WeQ is different from IQ, because WeQ is about relationship building, which we Africans are very, very good at. Because we have to get to the point of talking, engaging, negotiating. And people hear from labor, no, that's a skill. Shop stewards have a skill of negotiating. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a good skill. We must do, and this is from children all the way, as I say, to the young at heart. I'm never going to say elderly again, the young at heart. So that's the first one, WeQ, which is about empathy. It's about relationships. The second one is learning to earn. The learning to earn part is extremely important for me. Once again, get us away from the conveyor belt mentality. Because the conveyor belt mentality, and I know I've got a colleague here in the retail sector, that's the cut the cloth mentality. It's the same thing, right? Put this shoe in that box, close it, pass it on, cut off this head from this fish, pass it on. That's conveyor belt mentality. Learning to earn requires us to have entrepreneurial skills. It requires us to have problem-solving skills. And it requires us to understand what is required in a CV. How do you present yourself in an interview? How do you manage your finances? How can you start a new business? That is an entrepreneurial skill, so that's learning to earn. The third skill is digital fluency. And it's not just about digital fluency around appreciation of digital. It is also the affinity to digital. Do you think about digital as one of the ways in which you can solve problems? That's why, and I'm going to say it, Dr. Phil. That's probably why they didn't call you Dr. Phil, because calling you Dr. Phil has a very different connotation. But that is why we're talking about being able to have digital. We have to have digital skills so we can use digital to help us solve problems. And we don't really do enough of that. But it's not just about a skill, it's an appreciation also. And we do need the connectivity. That's our gap. We need connectivity. I wish government could give us cloud. I really do. I wish there could be this big public cloud above South Africa to allow anybody to have the most powerful machine on this planet. This smartphone has more information in here than what they used to send the Apollo to the moon. Really, you can find pretty much anything on here. You just have to look at it for 30 seconds and you learn something new. So the connectivity issue is important because we do need to adapt ourselves to the digital side. And it's not just about the digital skill, it's the fluency, it's the appreciation for everybody. So I've spoken about learning to earn, I've spoken about WeQ, I've spoken about digital fluency. There is also the creativity skills, right? We need more poets. We do. We do need to combine science and art, as we also alluded to. This has, and I think the universities are starting to recognize that people need to have a multidisciplinary approach to what the world is all about, because it is just getting more and more complex. I've spoken about creating a growth mindset. That is that view that you can be resilient enough to be able to do the job of the future that no one can tell you exists today, because we do not know. If anybody out there tells me that you know what the jobs of the future are, you have no idea. The only thing that you can do is prepare people for that new roles of the future, and that is about resilience, perseverance, change management capability, picking yourself up, flexibility, agility, to be able to do new things. And then the final one is specialization. But specialization is one of those. Specialization in terms of being a drone operator. Specializations in terms of cybersecurity. We need, as a country, cybersecurity skills. I think there's a whole list of skills that we should be focusing on, developing for our society, that sets us apart from anybody else. So, without going much further, that's sort of the points I wanted to make on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rose. So this is how we're proceeding. We will break for tea at 15:30, and George would have made his presentation by then, because he's the next person to present. But I've also been listening, and I think I want to agitate the crowd and the. So I must tell you that I bought my kids a toy, helicopter. It's broken. It's broken into pieces. They tried, it went up, and I tried, and I broke it. So, and I think it all has to do with what kind of access did you have to Pokemon and that and so on, right? That's one. The second thing, I want to tell you that we've got, in excess of 12 million kids in this country. The majority of them don't have access to those sophisticated games, which will start, changing their wiring and preparing them to operate in that manner. So the big challenge is, how do we close the gap? Because the rich fare very well through these revolutions. My kids are fine. They got these things. What should happen to the kids in Umtata, the corner of Umtata? So the thing about broadband and this access and so on, these are the gaps that we have to close. There's also a question about how we make the transition, right? So there's a group of academics who did not come here, and I spend a lot of time with them. They'll tell me, no, it's maths and science, forget it. It is maths and science. This thing, it's reading and maths and science, that's it, forget it. And the timetable in a school is clogged. There is subjects, yet the world is moving. We should be creating space for new subjects and this and that. Those are the things that we need to manage. How do we manage the transition so that we teach the kids things that would help them manage this new? There's a couple of colleagues from the Department of Basic Education. They sing a song, it's called 4 C's. Critical thinking, creativity, what else? Communication, and collaboration. Theoretically, they talk about it. Practically, it's not happening in the classroom. So that's the challenge. So I think, part of it is, how do we move from that cloud to a practical cloud of pushing our kids, preparing them to operate in the fourth or industrial, revolution that we have spoken about. In fact, there's a big thing, the world is starting to think that it's actually not jumping from one branch of a tree to another. It's about holding tightly with one hand on the branch that we've been holding and moving the next arm to the next branch. Because if we're going to jump, we'll fall. We risk the possibility of falling. So a big part of the question is, how do we make the transition? And how do we make the transition without lagging behind like we have lagged behind in the past? So that, ladies and gentlemen, was just the preparation for George to take us through his presentation, because all done, labor is at the receiving end.
Viva Human Resource Development Council, viva. Forward to forward thinking, forward. Hey, you guys, are you hungry or what? Where's the slide? Was I press here? You're supposed to put the presentation on.
Okay, colleagues, while we're waiting for them to put the presentation on, one delegate in this room sent me a message, Rose. It's about you, but I'll read it for you. You just miss a very powerful speaker who will be in your commission, Dr. Rose Phillips. She's brilliant. Her topic, digital, put 1 in 3 jobs at risk. So it started off well, but the issue is about the jobs and workers. We're on the same page. Exactly. So, colleagues, for us as a society, this whole thing about this industrial revolution might look for you like a new thing, but it's not. Because there's lessons that we can learn from the first industrial revolution, the second, the third, and the fourth. And human beings will always survive. The deputy president is now the president, or acting president until 2019. He asked us to come, because nobody voted for him, you know. The ANC voted for him into power. But anyway, the first industrial revolution, now we've got unions that is already more than 100 years old in South Africa. So our people have been through that revolution. And the important word that we must put between those two, the first and the second, is there must be a just transition. Okay? And the whole thing, it is about people's skills. Okay? Because if you don't have the skills, now, we didn't say your qualifications. We said your skills. So if you don't have, in those days, the steam train came in. You know, imagine what was that? That was powerful. So powerful that South Africa, in Kimberley, diamonds was discovered. And they used that steam to pull that Kimberley blocks out of the ground. And then they put the Kimberley blocks and they roll it with a steam, primitive thing, to break that Kimberley rock up. And inside the Kimberley rock is the diamonds. And even 100 years later, the people are still mining the tailings. Do you understand what I'm trying to say to you? Because in those days, they didn't have enough technology to uncover the diamonds. And that also impacted on another industry. It was the transport industry. You know, steam trains. South Africa is a big country. In order to move goods and people across this economy, you needed steam. So there was a stoker and there was an engineer. But this economy cooked. But we were ready those days to benefit. Right? The point is, are we now ready? No. The second industrial revolution came with electricity. Irrespective of what is the financial position of Eskom now, Eskom owed the workers in South Africa 100 billion rand. We've bought 100 billion rands of bonds from Eskom. I don't think we're going to get our money back. No, it's true. People are going off the grid. All right? They put up solar panels. The demand for electricity is going down. They go to NERSA, they say increase it with 23%. You think I'm talking democratic stories? So that electricity helped us to move our economy forward. You see, and that's what I like about Rose. She doesn't think like some of the men think in this room. One mind. She thinks big picture. She spoke about achieving higher inclusive economic growth. Because to achieve higher inclusive economic growth, you need, it's played in Samandi here. He doesn't like this word. Human capital. Okay, for you that don't know, human capital is another word for labor. Now, you need a kind of human capital that is flexible, that is learnable, that is committed to lifelong learning. Because in our industries, we think if we can go into the industry for 30 years, nothing is going to change. And that's the reason why SACWA stresses it to us about lifelong learning. Because sometimes you think you finish learning, now you can just stop and that. So colleagues, I told you now, I just wanted to put that on the board for you to get an idea. On the one now, on automation from 1970s to 2000, I don't think we are ready, okay? Because we are not there. We don't have a partnership to take us forward. You see, this is the title for our team, Partnership to Revitalize Work and Learning. That is the focus what these people had. How do we change business, labor, government? So the deputy president or the president took us with to Davos. So we didn't know much about Fourth Industrial Revolution. We thought it was something to do with Karl Marx. But we went because we were eager to learn. But now we understand this thing is technology driven. It's about robots, it's about all these things. But how do we collaborate to make sure that this transition is a fair and a just transition, that we don't leave our people behind, that we don't further make problems with unemployment and poverty. Now, what we are arguing now is this: there is going to be negative impacts. I don't want to lie to you. I'm not a politician. I'm a trade unionist, right? We have to get our membership fees every month. A politician comes to you once every 5 years. You never see him again. Next elections, 60 months later, he tell you another story. You want houses, stand aside. You want free cars, stand aside. Now, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, colleagues, it's going to have negative and positive issues for the economy. Now, I spoke to the DG just before we had our presentation, and I gave him a bit of an outline. We don't feature in this game at all because we don't manufacture the things that goes into the robot. What do we manufacture? There's only one country in the world that manufactures this. Do you know which country that is? Hey? Who? Donald Trump, man. Donald Trump. China import semiconductors from the US, and they pay the US 200 billion rand a year. Do you know how much money is that? It's more than our GDP. So China a few years ago, colleagues, thought that, okay, if they want the technology, then they're going to buy the shares of an American company. They tried, the Americans heard about this thing. Immediately, executive order. You know what is executive order? You make that law quickly. You don't consult with nobody. You cannot merge with the Chinese company. The Chinese try to steal the stuff, they can't. They thought, okay, let's go to the Germans. The Germans were ready to merge with them so that China can get the technology to design semiconductors. You can't. The Germans also stopped them. Luckily for us, colleagues, China is part of BRICS. Okay? And I think we must look at the partnership. Do we just want people that's going to buy technology? You import technology? Like we are now slaves of the Germans. We buy all the parts we buy in euros. We pay for the Mercedes-Benz and for the BMW parts we pay in euros, and then we bring it here, and in South Africa we assemble it and then we sell it again. Do you understand what we're trying to say to you? When we went there to look at this Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Chinese president told us, look, they didn't understand how capitalism works. They had to swim slowly through this ocean of capitalism. But China overtook Japan, overtook Germany, overtook Canada, and is now the second biggest country, GDP in the world. By 2025, it's going to be the largest country in the world. But China, we look at the minimum wages between the BRICS countries yesterday. Guess who minimum wages is the highest from the BRICS countries? Does somebody want to take a guess? Hey? It's China. China's minimum wage is higher than ours. Don't think about China as cheap labor anymore. They had that strategy before. Right? This strategy going forward is to build the capacity of the people, the human part of the capital. So, colleagues, what I'm trying to say to you is this. We've engaged with our Chinese colleagues yesterday in Nelspruit. We took them all the way from Brazil, Russia, India. We met with them in Nelspruit because we're tired of Cape Town, and Durban, and Joburg. We must take our guests and our visitors to the rural places also. Okay? We took them to the Kruger National Park. Hey, they just wanted to know what will happen if you pull a lion's tail. I said, don't even look. I look. Anyway, but China now came up with a strategy. And that is what I want to suggest to us. This fourth industrial revolution, we must turn it from a challenge to a growth strategy. Okay? And we see the partnership between these groupings. It must be NEDLAC, because the National Development Plan, did you read it? There's no chapter for this in, right? That's the gap. Number two, we must involve the Human Resource Development Council. You know, this thing of human capital. Don't worry, Blade is not here. We must involve the workers. We must let the private sector lead this process. The only one thing that we still need is we need to create a fund. That we must fund industry. That we invest in research, that we don't make the same mistake by importing technology from the Americans. You saw what the Americans did with the Iranians yesterday. They can't be trusted. Okay, look, I mean, I got not fears for the CIA. So, colleagues, in conclusion, China has put forward a proposal to start a fund of 410 billion rand. Okay? They are just going to use that money so that their companies can design their own semiconductors. That is the most important part that goes into the robots. Okay? If you can do that, already we are going to get thousands of students that wants to study on innovation and technology and how do we take South Africa forward. The only thing for us as labor, okay, is we want to be part of the process. We think such an agreement is possible, okay, and that would be a good outcome to take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I think we were very strategic in having you last, you know. We were kept, you know, entertained. So I think most of the inputs and contributions about the fourth industrial revolutions revolve around how do we take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution, and which is correct. But there's the other side. How do we avoid the adverse effects of the fourth industrial revolution? Because they are. And I think as we take the discussion forward, we need to entertain both sides But before we break for tea, I would like to take you to the HRD strategy towards 2030. And pages 43, I won't read the pages, I just want to draw your attention to what's in there. So the HRDC has been doing work for the past X number of years. In fact, the HRDC revised strategy was in 2010, which George was part of, and many others, and it has a 2030 outlook, right? Government has been doing some work, the private sector has been doing some work. Those ideas have been reduced into writing in this strategy, okay? So there is something that we have to build on. And there is something that we also have to reflect and suggest how to strengthen and ensure its realization. So from page 43, if you can look at, there are a couple of programs that the HRDC has. The first program, focuses on foundational education, or rather foundational education with science, technology, engineering, maths, and languages and life skills. So the understanding there is that, if you follow the pathway, you're going to have to increase the outputs, the maths, science, and languages outputs, right? There are a number of indicators there, success indicators. The second program is on page 47, and that focuses on TVET and the rest of the college system. Understanding that also contributes to, the HRDC or the HRD strategy. The third is on page 51. That has to do with education and training, research and innovation. And the fourth has to do with skills for the transformed society and the economy using workplace as a platform, right? And that's about it, isn't it? No. I think I'm leaving out one. The last one is the developmental or capable state. So I would like you to take that into account, that as part of the work that has been done or is being done so long, and continue to think about what are the gaps. So some of the gaps are, the definition of this fourth industrial revolution. What is it within the context of that strategy, right? So what are the recommendations and how should we take this forward? So before we break for lunch, I thought I should highlight that. But also, if there's anything to clarify from the previous presentation, this is the moment. Clarification? So things that you did not understand, because discussions we're going to have when we come back. So we have one clarification here. Do we have the mic? Or you can go ahead without the mic so long.
Yeah, my clarification is that it's based on this economy. That there's something that we showed as a country. That what kind of economy do we want? Because we talk of China, we talk of Germany, we talk of all this continent. What about an African economy, which we need to have and be able to sustain it? Because if we don't understand our African economic situation, we will cry and cry and cry. But we don't want to cry. We want to understand what we want. In the country, we have a lot of things that we can be able to build on. Why don't we take them on the skills that we have? The Honorable Member Tism Tlazana did introduce the skills development for us to take it further. Why don't we do that? Thank you so much.
I have 4 minutes before we break for tea. There's another point of clarification. Also, one, so rather 2, 3.
The clarity I'm looking for is to Comrade Dennis George. You excited me when you were agreeing with the economic inclusion, economic growth, when you spoke to the Kimberley Rock uncovering. I thought you were actually going to end up telling us how the SLPs has what this the social labor plan regulations, how successful they have been, and how what DTI is saying this innovative model of advanced additive manufacturing technology is going to expedite beneficiation in this country. But you fell short. If you could perhaps tell us how the labor social plans have driven beneficiation in this country. Thanks.
Yes, another one here.
Dr. Phillips referred to the importance of dexterity in the hands, which is a skill that you gain from birth if you're able to use those limbs. And earlier on, the other speaker, Elsa, referred to the fact that manufacturing has declined. I see those, both the manufacturing, because in manufacturing we use our hands to produce. You indicated that we have declined. I just want to understand, how are we going to, so I'm seeking clarity on, we have allowed our own manufacturing to go down and we haven't intervened. And we know that this whole thing that we're talking about builds on our capacity to use those things. I just want some clarity. Was that deliberate that we allowed it to decline? What happened there? I need clarity, please.
So thank you very much. I want to suggest that we start with Dennis when we come back and respond to these questions, including a sense that's emerging that the nature of work and the nature of contracts, employment contracts, will change. More and more people will not be employed by anybody. You know, some of them may just be blockchain miners, you know, so that they don't pay any fees to Dennis. And the question against that is, is there anything that requires protection from the current way of doing things? Do we know what we stand to lose, you know, going forward? So should we be thinking about our labor, you know, policies differently in order to protect, you know, some of the things that are good, or to usher in, you know, some of the things that we did not have in the past, but they are good? I didn't say things like Uber and stuff, but, you know, these things are changing. This sharing economy, it's you know, it's building up. People will not have to be employed. So these are some of the questions that I think we should come back and deal with. And you'll guide me more on how to take the discussions forward. But I do want to bid, you know, farewell to Phil, who will be leaving. So Phil, if you have one last, you know, comment you can make before you leave.
Yeah, an inspiring one. There are people who have come late in growing their economies, and they have excelled and become even better than those who were there before. These countries are all in front of us. So this question of what kind of economy we want, we mustn't think that we cannot do it. So if this is an opportunity for us to have that conversation, the Department of Science and Technology is going to be part of it.
Thank you very much. On that note, can we come back at 4:45? And I promise you, if we're done, we'll finish early. We don't have to, you know, drag it out to 5. But we'll have lively discussions when we get back. 4:45, we're back here. And if you hear back 4:45,